use, but at this address, 609 West Waters Avenue, for a work day. Oh, look at this shadow. There's a piece of hair going crazy over here. Don't get distracted now that I said it. We're going to work to keep 2 of our classrooms in good condition. One's a bigger, not really keeping it, but turning it into good condition, which is cool. And it's going to be nice to have a new classroom, right? It's just been kind of out of commission, used for storage of this or that. As tends to happen with empty rooms, they just become storage. You have that drawer in your house, right, that you just throw everything in. I know Keith doesn't. He's organized all of his drawers. We've talked about it. But most of us have that junk drawer. Well, at Waters, we have rooms instead of drawers. So that's pretty fun. So we're going to have a new classroom after next week, which is cool. And we'll get going around 10 a.m., and we'll share lunch together as well. So there you go. There's no such thing as a free lunch. And what you're paying for the lunch in this case is your labor. Secondly, we have, as you know, on the fourth Saturday of every month, we handle a kinship mobile free market. And we go to a location up off of Fletcher. It's a parking lot where there's like a convenience store and a laundromat, very walkable area, apartments nearby, and so it's a good spot for that kind of thing. And, you know, I think you all have a general idea of the kinship, but like as time passes, we can get disconnected from the things that other people in the community are doing. It's actually a pretty great thing. Like, you know, I was there yesterday with Caleb, and we kind of just, it's so routine at this point. It's just a thing we got to check off our list. But when you really step back, it's like, oh, wow, there's a lot of good food here, a lot of produce, a lot of like dairy and meat and bread, and it's all like high quality stuff, and it's kind of awesome that we have the opportunity to set that up for people. In June and July, so the fourth Saturdays of those months would be June 28th and July 26th. We need some people to cover the kinship. I haven't talked to Caleb. I don't know if Caleb will be there or not. He usually is, but I won't be. I'm out of town. Actually, and I need Britt reminding me, August. The next 3 months, I will be out of town for various reasons on the fourth Saturdays. So I just want to make sure that Caleb's not just alone there, right? So if you want to make sure Caleb's not alone, we can all say, aw, then please consider helping out with the kinship free market. And you can tell Caleb or you can tell myself, and we'll make sure that you get reminded about that too. It's one thing to say, yeah, I want to do that, but we'll make sure we'll send you some reminder texts as well. It's a great connection to the sermon, so just keep that in mind and then stick it at the end, and that'll be one of my applications, and I didn't have to come up with one. There you go. Okay. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid. The words of Jesus in John 14. Words we may quickly gloss over. Bye, children. Words that sound religious-y, sound Jesus-y. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not be afraid. But words that maybe don't come naturally to us. Is that where you are today? Don't be afraid. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Are your hearts trouble-free, anxiety-free, fear-free? Do you have no burdens? Or are you burdened, disquieted, anxious, maybe about where your children will end up, maybe about a relationship with a partner, maybe about the state of our nation, maybe about how you appear to others or what others are thinking about you, maybe about your job, maybe about the injustices that you see around you both locally and globally. Maybe about the economy or your future financially or your family's future financially. Did I cover them all? Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not let them be afraid. Well, Jesus, how are we supposed to do that? It might feel like this call is a little too fantastical to take seriously. We can imagine this call to peace coming from the Jesus in one of those mid-century paintings, the ones where he's kind of like looking into the distance. It's just the semi-profile, and it's like hazy. It's been like softened up, and he has the really straight, long hair and the pointy nose. The least Jewish-looking Jesus we can imagine for ourselves. And we could imagine maybe that Jesus saying, don't worry, have peace. And maybe the words of do not let your heart be troubled sound as unrealistic to us as that image of Jesus is. But the fact is that our text from John 14 comes in a really interesting time in the story of Jesus and his disciples. John 14 actually begins with Jesus giving this same call to the disciples. You may remember that. If you're like me, you learned it in kindergarten. Let not your hearts be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. Do you hear the ye? Because I memorized it in the King James Version. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God, trust in me as well. And then all of this discussion, John 14 and the surrounding chapters, fall within a larger charge that Jesus is giving to his disciples as he's giving them a final word, preparing to be betrayed and to suffer and to die, and die alone. And he knows it because he tells the disciples, you're all going to not hang around. Right before Jesus says, do not let your hearts be troubled. Right before that, the last thing that he says, the last thing that John records Jesus saying before saying, do not let your hearts be troubled, is, Peter, you will deny me 3 times. The words of Jesus in John 13, you will deny me 3 times before the rooster crows, but do not let your hearts be troubled. That's pretty tough stuff. Jesus isn't saying to them, don't let your hearts be troubled in one of their best times, when things are good, when the bills are paid, when it seems like the mission's going to be completed. He's saying this precisely when they are experiencing fear and anxiety and disquiet and discomfort and worry. In fact, this whole discussion, this final charge, these last words, Jesus speaks them once Judas leaves the dinner party, the Last Supper. And in that act, where Jesus tells Judas, hey, I know you have business to do, go ahead and just get it done now. After that turning point, John says that Jesus was troubled in his spirit. So from a place of being troubled in his own heart, Jesus says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Jesus doesn't say, hey, don't be afraid, as someone himself was unafraid. He doesn't say, don't worry, as someone who himself was never worried. Jesus knows what it is to have that feeling rising in your chest. The one, things don't quite feel like they're lining up. You don't quite know how to get a handle on everything that's happening around you. Jesus is acquainted with that feeling, and in the face of that fear, and in the face of that doubt, Jesus says, you don't need to worry. How can that be? Well, Jesus reminds them of the movement in which they're rooted. The idea of being rooted is one he actually picks up after our text for today. He talks about the metaphor of a vine, and he speaks of himself as a vine growing within the soil of God's movement in the world, and that the disciples are like branches that are coming off of that vine. And he says, if you remain in the vine, you'll be healthy, right? You'll get the nutrients you need from the soil. He says, remain in me. He speaks of this connection, this rootedness in John 13 as well, and he tells them that they can be confident that they have seen God in the time they have spent together. The disciples wonder about this, and they say, Jesus, we don't know what you mean. You always talk in these weird, riddly things. Just show us God face to face. I'm not really sure what they were looking for in that ask. I don't know if that's something I would ever desire. But Jesus tells them, what are you talking about? Show us God. You've seen God in the works that I have done. He tells them it's the work that he has done where they see the life of God. He reminds them that by looking at the work they have done together, they see they are connected to each other and thus connected to God. And he even goes on to say, and you will do greater works than even I have done. Thus seeing the life of God again and again in your own life. And he says that the force that connects them together, that allows them to stay rooted in this vine, to stay connected to God's work in the world, is love. He leaves them, of course, with that final command, love one another. And tells them, people will know you are my disciples if you love one another. And then after telling them this, he promises them that God's own creative spirit, the very breath that hovered over the formless void of the waters, bringing life, will be among them, comforting them, guiding them, advocating on their behalf. So Jesus doesn't tell his disciples, don't let your hearts be troubled. When you see all the things around you, just pretend they don't exist. Jesus doesn't say, don't let your hearts be troubled, just forget about it. Jesus doesn't say, don't let your hearts be troubled, just live in the moment. Jesus doesn't say, don't let your hearts be troubled. You can only control what you can control, not what others do. And while some of those things may or may not be true, and they may or may not be true based on who says them and when they say them and all of those things, Jesus doesn't say any of it. What he says is, do not let your hearts be troubled, but be rooted, connected to each other in love, expressed through work. And that is the context in which we hear, I give you peace not like the world gives. The world doesn't bring peace at all. In fact, it brings the opposite of peace. The world wants us to bring hurry, constant distraction, tension in our shoulders, anxiety, looking over our shoulders. You know, the Greek word that is translated faith in the New Testament, its opposite is to look over the shoulder. Right? We're always like worried about what's coming behind us. Is someone going to get us? Is someone out to get us? We don't trust. We can't trust anything or anyone. Jesus doesn't want that. That's what the world gives. He says, my peace is nothing like what the world offers. I don't offer you distraction or isolation or conflict or anxiety. No, Jesus says we can have a life together, and it is unlike the world, a life together that can transcend the various differences we all have with each other, that can put to work in new ways the various differences that we all have with each other, that can make things that used to be enemies fruitful tools for the work of love. This past Thursday, I attended a Hope Clergy Caucus. About once a quarter or so, clergy from various Hope congregations gather together, and we do a text study, not tech study. That would be if Keith went, I guess, or Tyler, I don't know. We do a text study, and we read the passage of Scripture, and we talk about it, and we ask questions around it. How is it that this informs our justice ministries? We hear issue updates, right? We eat together. We strategize about what it means to be clergy and to lead our congregations. It's a really beautiful thing, and this week we heard from Luke, where Jesus tells his followers about having a strong foundation. And you know the story. There was a man who built a house on a rock, and there was a man who built a house on sand. I almost said stone. One was not a stone. Stone and sand. And the storms come, and the sand one gets blown away, Three Little Pigs style. And then the stone one stays, right? And we asked the question, what does it mean to have a foundation of stone in our justice ministries? Okay. Pretty obvious so far, right? Well, Rabbi Joel from Sharai Zedek was there, and he emphasized and reiterated in a way that I thought was pretty good, and it resonated with everybody, that one of the elements of a strong foundation in a justice ministry, and probably in all our ministries, is gathering people together in ways that transcends the things that easily divide us, particularly political party affiliation. right? And he was saying, hey, the messaging's got to remain clear. The work that we're doing is a work for all people, and that work can unite us, and it shouldn't matter based on whoever you did or didn't vote for, or whatever that paper in the mail from the supervisor of elections says on it. And we all talked about our own propensities to perhaps assume something about others as we talk to them, based on what we know or don't know about them. And we talked about the fact that our broader culture is not in any kind of place that resembles that right now, right? Our political landscape isn't like that. Our social media feeds are not like that. I give you peace not like the world gives you. It's interesting that Jesus says, they will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. It's so easy in the West to want to say something like, they will know we're Jesus' disciples if we all think the same way or agree with one another. But Jesus didn't say that. He didn't say, they will know that you are my disciples by the statements that you issue as you gather in your larger institutions. Right? They will know you're my disciples by the creeds that you have crafted and recite weekly. He didn't say that. He just said, if you love one another, they will know. That struck me. It strikes me every time. And when I fellowship with other clergy, it's a very real way of seeing this, because if you sat us down and said, today we're not going to talk about our justice ministries and our congregations, we're going to have a theological discussion. Oh man, right? We wouldn't agree at all. Catholics and Episcopals and Methodists and Presbyterians and Unitarians and Jewish, we'd be all over the map. We all believe very different things. But there is a deep connection around the loving work of God's peace in the world. When Jesus says peace, what do you think is going on in his head? What do you think he means when he says peace? What other word do you think is operative for Jesus as he's telling his disciples about this posture of not being troubled? Anybody got any ideas? When we hear peace, what should we hear, since Jesus is the one saying it? Since Jesus is Jewish. Shalom. Jesus is saying he's giving to his disciples this way of life of shalom. Inner peace, well-being internally, well-being externally, right? Sustenance, feeling cared for, feeling valued. Not like the world could ever possibly give. Shalom, peace, well-being, these things come from being rooted together in love and doing the work of love that precisely brings us to those we would have never expected. This is what we see demonstrated for us in the book of Acts. Paul is swept up in this movement of God's loving work in the world. Of course, he's going all over, trying to make these connections with others. Because that's what you do. 10 o'clock hours, people from before. We had this great discussion. What does it mean to share the good news, right? So Paul's going town to town, not just in Judea anymore. Now he and his co-workers want to go to the rest of the European world and eventually to Asia, and they want to go everywhere. They want to make these connections, these loving connections, and they find themselves, after Paul has a vision, in Macedonia, modern-day Greece. And they stop in the city of Philippi, which Luke wants to make very clear to us, as you heard, is an imperial colony. It's a Greek city, and now it's also an outpost for the Roman Empire. So it's Greco-Roman all the way, right? And this group of Jews is coming to town. Paul's first move is to go and find the synagogue. It's the Sabbath, he's going to worship. Well, we don't know what happens, but they don't find a synagogue. Right? Maybe it's that small of a presence for the Jewish community, and they didn't find one. Maybe it's that community was concerned about their own well-being politically and was laying low. We know there was persecution from time to time. Whatever it is, he doesn't get to a synagogue, and he thinks, well, no one's meeting in the city. Maybe someone's meeting outside the gates. Just like Jesus' work in the life of Paul, we see this demonstration that God's loving work takes us outside the walls. It takes place in the literal marginalized places. it'll 100% affect the capital center, right? Eventually, Paul will get even to Rome, speak to the highest seats of power. And the promise in Ephesians is that God's wisdom is made known to the powers, to the principalities through the church. So that absolutely will and must happen. But what lays the groundwork is the loving connection among those outside the gates. And so Paul goes and finds a group of women who are washing in the river, perhaps. Maybe they're just there because it connects them. They see in the beauty of creation the beauty of spirit. But they're praying, they're worshiping at the river, and Paul finds this one Lydia, one of them who has taken an interest in the God that Paul has come to know. Luke makes it clear, she's not Jewish, she's Gentile. But she's open to knowing God in ways other than the world has given her. They have a conversation around this. Paul talks to her about the teachings and message of Jesus. If you love one another, you will have peace that is unlike what the world knows. And she says, yeah, I want that. That's what I'm into. And so she's baptized, and her whole household is baptized. And she has a household, which means she had some measure of wealth. She runs a small economy, right? The word for household in Greek. And so a new connection is made. One that doesn't make sense according to the world, right? Remember the hard time that Jesus got from people when he met with a Samaritan woman outside the city gates? See, the story kind of played out again. Jewish and Gentile folk gathering together, men and women gathering together. Things that weren't commonly done from either side. And then what I love about the way that the story ends, she says, hey, come and stay at my house. That's the end of that story. Isn't that powerful? I'll unpack it a little bit. Receive hospitality. It's such a small thing. We don't really think about it, right? But think about how radical this is. Paul's really not supposed to be at her house, right? And he did make other Jewish folks upset by doing that kind of thing. But even beyond that, we now have a small group of traveling folks who are proclaiming this pretty distinctively Jewish message in a heavily Roman-occupied area. Where are they going to stay? Where are they going to be supported? What are they going to do for food, shelter? Well, now they have a place in Philippi. It's practical, it's tangible, it's strategic. Philippi is now a place of peace, of shalom. It's a place where there's well-being, where people can be cared for. This is what the work of love is, what it does, what it looks like, the work of connecting, the work of organizing, the work of building relationships. This is what love does. It provides for all of us systems of support and systems of care. It's such a beautiful example of Jesus' words because they can sound like just words sometimes. We can hear Jesus say, I give you peace. Peace by love working. Peace you've never known. And it can sound unattainable. But it's not actually as hard as it sounds. When we show up for one another, when we're able to share each other's burdens emotionally and physically, when we have people in our lives who can be a listening ear, a presence of quiet comfort, or a place to get a meal, then we have found peace. Our job is to be like those early disciples, to be like Paul, building new connections, building new relationships, finding a thing we have in common, and then making it grow from there. That's all Paul ever did. Let's not be scared of telling people what we have found in the life of Jesus. Make a common connection and see where it goes. Have an open posture. See where it takes you. Where it took Paul and Lydia was a beautiful place. And then think about what grew from that. Of course, we know that Philippi goes on to have a thriving congregation. Paul stays in contact with them, and we have the beautiful letter written to them that provides us 2,000 years later with so much encouragement to this day. Words of power for us, words of reminders of what it means to sacrifice for one another in community. Powerful, beautiful language, and it all started with the woman outside the city gates. God's work in the world is unexpected. It doesn't follow the rules of culture. God's work in the world doesn't demand of us that we have anything figured out about anybody. We don't have to determine who fits in or who doesn't, what their place will be or if they should have a place at all. None of that is ever our concern. All we have to do is the work, and it's real work, the work of building loving connection. That work is guided by God's Spirit, and we will see God's Spirit. And where the Spirit of God is, there is freedom, there is peace, there is joy, there is depth, the kind of depth that can withstand all of the things in our world, our anxieties and our fears and our worries. We will not be free from those. Right? Jesus said, don't worry, as he worried. Don't let your heart be troubled. As he cried out, let this cup pass from me. We will not be free of those things. But the depth of love that we find will allow us to rise above them. This is our good news. May we grasp it fiercely. Let's pray. God, we ask that you give us the courage to embrace community. We ask that you free us from the fears that keep us separate from each other. Although our hearts are united in prayer, I cannot speak for every person in this room, but I'm personally sick and tired of the burdens that our world places on us, and I want to share them with others. So please show us again that your peace is real for us. In Jesus' name, we ask this. Amen. On the night